Let's look at some examples of using block elements versus inline elements. The div is a pretty common item that we'll use, so I might put this in and have this be my overview container. We'll move it in a minute to have that make more sense. And I want to close that tag as well. I can put in here, this is my overview. And if I put another div in here, we'll just call this second div for now. We can put it in and we can say this is another div. We'll save that and re-render, and you can see this is my overview and this is another div rendered on different lines. Now you might think that's because I put them on different lines in the source, but in fact, as we'll see shortly, when it comes to white space, the browsers don't really care. I'll put the divs on the same line and refresh, and I have the same output. These are block level elements. This particular element, the div, by default is going to be treated as a block level container, and it's going to render, and then whatever follows it is going to render on its own next kind of logical line or space in the document. It's not going to show up in line with that. Now, by contrast, if I put a span, which is an inline element in here, for my overview, we'll clean this up a little bit because the white space doesn't matter, and we re-render. Notice again, no changes here. This is an inline element, so this is going to cause overview to be logically grouped under this span, but because it's an inline element, that overview renders right inside of the div. We switch that now and try and make that its own div within there, and we'll even put another item here to spice it up a little bit. Save. Notice now what happens. This is goes on one line because that's the first part of our div, but now we have a new block element here, this div, and so that then the overview is going to show up as a new block. Likewise, the content finishes out there as a block element. So keep that in mind as you're developing that these elements, like the div, are by nature block elements and are going to render in that particular way. Another example of a block element is the P or paragraph element. I'll put some text in here, just a long string across there, and we'll hit save and reload. And you'll notice now that that renders out as a paragraph of text. If we copy that, we'll get two of those, and as we refresh, notice we see the same kind of rendering where we have these things blocked in their own blocks. It doesn't continue on the same line, but also since it's a paragraph, notice that the spacing is a little different. When we have the div, we're getting this kind of single type spacing. When we have the paragraph, it's going to render it as a paragraph. Most browsers will do this, a paragraph of text with familiar spacing for the rendering and the reading of those paragraph elements. Now, one of the things that you might think about doing is saying, well, I have this big chunk of text or this paragraph, and I want to change that up. Maybe I want to wrap something in here. I want to wrap this piece in a div because I want to call it out in some way. I want to wrap it. We'll save that. Now, the browsers, as we've shown previously, will do their best here to try and help you out. So you could see because it's a div, it got rendered as a block on its own line. And we see a break there. It's just a little weird. But if we take that content, save that, and we go to the validator, the w3.org, we paste that in and check it, we're going to get an error based on the specification. And if we look down here, we'll see that it doesn't really like our div inside of a p tag. Now, the paragraph element is technically rendered as a block or similar to the blocks, but this is a case where the paragraph or other inline elements such as the span can't contain block level elements like div. So while the browser may in fact render it, may even get it to do what you want, you shouldn't do that. You want to follow the specification. You want to make sure that you're creating valid documents That's going to help you make sure that those things get rendered correctly in all of the browsers that come and view it, and you don't go on the whims of the browser vendor and how they decide to render those strange things you're doing that don't follow the spec.